my child. I want you to close your eyes and picture a night so dark that it feels like the stars themselves have turned their backs on the world. It was only a few hours ago, in a place where the roads twist and turn like snakes through the empty fields, far away from the safety of the city lights. The town nearby was deep in slumber, every window dark, every door locked tight against the unknown, unaware that something ancient was waking up just a few miles away. There was a deputy out on patrol, a man who had driven these roads 1,000 times before, his tires humming a lonely rhythm against the asphalt. He was tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from seeing too much of the world's sadness, and his coffee sat cold and forgotten in the cup holder next to him. He thought this was just another shift, another night of silence, but the atmosphere was shifting around him in ways he couldn't yet see. The air that night felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the sky had lowered itself to press against the earth, waiting for something terrible to snap. His radio was murmuring in the background, a faint, scratchy folk song fighting to be heard over the static, a ghostly melody that sounded like it was coming from another time. It was the only sound in the car, a thin tether to reality, until suddenly even that was taken away from him. Without warning, the radio cut out completely, not with a burst of static or a fade, but with a sharp, violent silence that rang louder than any noise. He frowned, tapping the dashboard, trying to bring the comfort of the noise back, but the device was dead, leaving him alone with the sound of his own breathing. And then it hit him. A smell so foul and foreign that it made his stomach turn instantly. It wasn't the smell of garbage or decay that he was used to. It was sharp, sour, like wet earth mixed with something that had been rotting for a century. It flooded the car, thick and invisible, forcing him to gag and roll down the window just to get a lung full of clean air. But the outside air was just as tainted. If you have ever felt a sudden unexplained fear when you were alone, I want you to type, "I trust my instincts," in the comments right now. It is your spirit warning you just as his was warning him. Through the windshield, his eyes caught a flicker in the distance, a faint, wavering glow out in the middle of the dark field. At first, his logical mind tried to explain it away. He thought it might be teenagers with a bonfire, or perhaps a farmer burning brush. But as he slowed the cruiser, the beams of his headlights cut through the tall grass and revealed something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't a fire at all. It was a stillness. A scene so perfectly arranged that it looked like a stage set for a play no one wanted to watch. There, lying in the grass, was a shape that looked undeniably human, surrounded by something that had no business being in a farmer's field. He saw stones, large, smooth stones, arranged in a circle so precise it looked like it had been measured by a mathematician. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a primal warning drum, as he grabbed his flashlight and stepped out into the damp night. The beam of his light shook in his grip, dancing over the grass until it landed squarely on the figure inside the circle. It was a man lying flat on his back with his arms resting peacefully at his sides, his eyes closed as if he were in a deep, dreamless sleep. But the deputy knew better. He had seen enough death to recognize the stillness that comes when the spirit has left the body. He grabbed his radio, his voice trembling as he called out to dispatch. "I've got a body out here off Route 17. Send backup now." The silence of the night was soon shattered by the wail of sirens and the blinding flash of red and blue lights cutting through the dark. Other officers arrived, their boots crunching on the gravel, their faces grim as they approached the scene with caution. They moved slowly, stepping carefully as if the ground itself might be a trap, their eyes drawn instantly to the strange circle of stones. These were not random stones pulled from the ground. If this video brought hope to your soul, please like and subscribe. They were smooth, polished, and nearly identical, placed with careful precision. Their arrangement felt intentional, almost ceremonial, as if someone had created a sacred circle. Yet something about it felt deeply wrong. At the center lay the man. He rested there untouched by the flashing lights and chaos around him, almost like a display placed deliberately in the middle of the field. Then the story took a turn that left even the most hardened officers shaken. One veteran cop, a man who had spent decades on the force and believed nothing could surprise him anymore, knelt beside the body to confirm the death. He reached out with his gloved hand, expecting the cold stiffness of a corpse. But the moment his fingers touched the man's arm, he jerked back violently, as if he had touched a live wire. His face drained of color. His eyes widened in confusion and fear. "What is it?" one of the younger officers asked nervously. The veteran stared at the body, his hand trembling in the air. Then he whispered, "He's warm." The rookie laughed uneasily, assuming the old officer had simply lost his nerve in the cold night. To prove him wrong, he stepped forward and pressed his fingers against the dead man's wrist. The confidence vanished from his face instantly. The skin was warm, not just slightly warm, but soft and alive with heat, like someone who had been breathing moments ago. Yet there was no pulse, no breath, no movement. The man was unmistakably dead. The officers exchanged uneasy glances as the static from their radios crackled through the silence. They checked their watches. They examined the body again. Rigor mortis had already begun, stiffening the limbs. By every medical standard, the man had been dead for many hours, perhaps half a day. But the warmth remained. It clung to the body like a secret, defying the freezing night air. What could keep a body warm long after life had left it? If you have a theory, write it in the comments. Tell me what you believe caused this. The officers tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe the ground beneath him held heat. But when they touched the soil, it was cold and damp from the rain. Maybe the stones had absorbed warmth earlier in the day. But when they laid their hands on the smooth rocks, they were colder than the night itself. There was no heater hidden nearby, no chemical smell, nothing that could explain what they were seeing. They stood silently in a circle, their flashlights cutting through the rising fog. No one spoke above a whisper. It felt as if raising their voices might wake something unseen, because this no longer felt like an ordinary crime scene. The air carried a strange pressure, as if something invisible was watching them from the darkness. What they did not know was the truth. They could not feel the spiritual weight that had settled over that field. This was not just a place where a man had died. It was something far older. The field itself had a history. The people in that town rarely spoke about it. When they drove past it, they avoided looking too long, as if eye contact with that land might invite something into their lives. For generations, it had been a place everyone quietly agreed to stay away from. A lonely patch of ground where the wind seemed to carry whispers, where the air felt heavier than anywhere else in the valley. Old men sitting on their porches sometimes shared stories passed down from their grandparents. Stories about strange lights floating above that field at night. Stories about shadows that separated themselves from trees and moved across the grass. And voices that called your name when you were standing completely alone. They call the land cursed, haunted. A thin place where the barrier between our world and the next has worn dangerously thin. Even the farmer's practical men, who trust the soil more than superstition, leave that particular field untouched. They refuse to plant crops in ground that feels wrong beneath their boots. Animals sense it too. Birds refuse to nest there. Stray dogs whimper and run if they wander too close. Something about that land pushes life away. But the stones found around the body were something new, something even the oldest residents had never seen before. No one remembered them being there before that night, and certainly not arranged like that. These were not ordinary rocks pulled from the earth. They were smooth, polished, almost perfect, like they had been shaped with knowledge far beyond human hands. The officers investigating the scene were baffled. There were no tire tracks in the mud, no footprints leading to the circle. The stones were enormous, far too heavy for one person to carry. Yet the wet ground showed no drag marks, no signs of machinery. It was as if they had simply appeared, placed there by something that didn't need to touch the earth to move matter. And the body at the center was not dumped there in panic. It was positioned carefully, deliberately, like a piece of dark art or a message meant to be read. But that raises an even more disturbing question. Who was the man lying in the cold grass? And why was he chosen? The truth is, he was no stranger to the shadows. In fact, he had spent years walking paths most people would be too afraid to even glance toward. He was a man who believed he could control the darkness. Power, wealth, influence. He thought he could use forces he barely understood, take what he wanted from them, and walk away untouched. He believed life was a negotiation, that he could make a deal with the dark and outsmart the consequences. But he learned something far too late. You cannot bargain with forces older than time itself. You cannot deceive something that sees every hidden corner of your soul. He called out to the shadows, and they answered. For a while it seemed like he had won. Success came quickly. Opportunities opened. Influence grew around him. Have you ever wanted something so badly you felt tempted to do anything to get it? If so, pause for a moment and type "I choose light." Because darkness never gives anything for free. It always collects its debts. To understand his fate, you must understand who he was to the people in that town. He wasn't some mysterious hermit hiding in isolation. He was familiar. The man you'd see at the diner on Sunday mornings, sipping coffee and laughing at local gossip. The neighbor you'd chat with at the market while picking out apples. Friendly, easygoing, ordinary. But behind that warm smile, something heavier lived in his eyes. He had always been drawn to the forbidden, to secrets whispered in darkness, to promises of power that carried a hidden price. He wasn't born evil. No one is. But step by step, decision by decision, he walked toward it. Years ago, he found something, or perhaps it found him. Maybe an old book hidden in an attic. Maybe a voice in the night promising him everything he ever wanted. It offered him a life beyond the ordinary. And in his hunger, he accepted. He spoke the words. He made the promises. And at first, it worked exactly as he hoped. His life changed quickly. A new car in the driveway, expensive clothes, opportunities appearing as if by magic. People began to envy him, but every gift from the darkness comes with a chain attached, invisible but unbreakable. And by the time he felt its weight, it was already too late. The town thought they knew him. They only knew the mask. But for those paying close attention, there were cracks in that perfect disguise. Sometimes he would disappear for days, and when he returned, there was something in his eyes that made people look away. Animals always sensed something wrong about him. Dogs would growl low in their throats whenever he passed. Cats would hiss and scatter as if fleeing from something invisible. The air itself seemed to shift when he entered a room, as though a shadow followed one step behind him, unseen, but unmistakably present. He hid it well, masking everything with charm and an easy smile. Yet truth has a way of rising to the surface, and that night in the field, the truth finally caught up with him. It came in the form of a perfect circle of stones. His death was not a random tragedy, and it was not a heart attack. The warmth in his body was a signature. The darkness had come to collect what it was owed. It did not arrive with fire or chaos. It arrived with silence, with precision, with the certainty that there would be no escape. He had tried to break the deal. When he finally realized the price was his own soul, he ran. He believed he could hide in a quiet town like this, blending in with ordinary people and disappearing into a peaceful life. But the shadows reminded him of a rule older than memory. You do not leave the darkness. The darkness leaves you. The warmth still lingering in his body was not life refusing to fade. It was something else refusing to let him go. A mark, a warning, a message written in a language the unseen world understands. The officers standing in that field could feel it, even if they could not explain it. The air felt wrong. The silence pressed down on them like a weight, and the field itself seemed to be watching. The presence there was not human, and it was not kind. It was older than the mountains surrounding the valley. It moved through the shadows with a quiet authority that made even the night sky feel distant. It did not need thunder or lightning to announce its arrival. Its power was silent and overwhelming. It had come for one reason. The man lying in the grass had betrayed the forces he once called upon. He wanted the gifts, but refused to pay the price that came with them. The officers searched for answers. They examined the ground. They studied the stones. But nothing made sense. They wrote their reports with uneasy hands, knowing deep down that what they had witnessed was not simply a crime scene. It was a reckoning, a message, something the town would never forget. By morning, the whispers had already begun. When the sun finally rose over the mountains, the town was buzzing with a nervous energy that had not existed the day before. The rumors drifted through the diner where locals gathered for coffee. They spread at the gas station. They reached even the steps of the church. People stood in quiet circles, trading stories about the field, the body, and what it might mean. Some called it a curse. Others spoke of judgment. A few whispered about something far older, something they did not even have words to describe. Parents pulled their children closer, warning them to stay far away from that piece of land. Fear moved quietly through the town, and soon strange things began to happen. At first they were small, but impossible to ignore. Lights flickered in homes that had never had electrical problems before. They blinked on and off as if responding to something unseen. Dogs barked suddenly at empty corners of rooms, their fur standing on end as they stared into darkness their owners could not see. People woke in the middle of the night, covered in cold sweat. Their dreams filled with strange images they could not explain. Smooth stones, circles in the grass, shadows moving just beyond the edge of sight. The town was no longer the same. That night in the field had left a mark not only on the ground, but on every home and every heart. And to truly understand what had begun there, you must look further back. Because the history of that field reaches far beyond the town itself. Long before the first road was built, long before the first house stood in the valley, that land was already known. A place of stories, a place of power, and a place where shadows had always lingered. Long before the town existed, before roads, fences, or houses, the native people who first walked this land already knew something about that field. They called it a sacred place. Not holy in the way churches are holy, but powerful. A place where the veil between worlds was dangerously thin. They never tried to build there. Instead, they left small offerings at its edge, not to worship what lived there, but to keep the balance, to keep whatever stirred beneath the soil at peace. Then the settlers arrived. They heard the warnings and ignored them. Driven by the hunger to conquer land and build their lives, they tried to tame the field. But the land refused. Crops would not grow there. Farm equipment would break down the moment it crossed the property line. Men called it bad soil, bad luck, faulty machines. But deep down, they knew the truth. Something about that place could not be explained. And over time, the stories began to grow. They spoke of a hunter who vanished in those tall grasses. Days later, his rifle was found lying in the dirt, untouched. They spoke of a child who wandered too close and returned strangely different, whispering about voices calling from the field, voices no one else could hear. One farmer tried to clear the land for planting. The next morning, he woke to find his tools scattered across the ground and his fences ripped apart by hands no one could see. Because the field was never just a field. It was a threshold, a doorway, a place where the rules of our world no longer seemed to apply. And now, with a body lying in a perfect circle of stones, the town suddenly remembered those old stories, and for the first time, they believed them. The man found in the field had heard those whispers too. Everyone in town had. Maybe he once laughed at the stories like the others. But eventually, something about that place began to pull at him. Quietly, patiently. He wasn't the first person to search for answers there, and he certainly wasn't the first to believe he could control whatever power slept beneath that ground. Others had tried before him. Some came back changed, hollow shadows of who they once were. Others never came back at all. But this man believed he was different, smarter, stronger. He thought he could take what the field offered and walk away untouched. He was wrong, and the price he paid became a warning left for the entire town to see. But this story isn't only about him, and it isn't only about the field. It's about the people who live in the shadow of it. Because the field has always been there, silently watching lives unfold around it. And the man wasn't the only one who felt its pull. Others in the town feel it too, though they rarely admit it out loud. The teenager who sneaks out at night, standing at the edge of the tall grass, feeling a strange thrill he cannot explain. The old woman who grips her cross tighter every time she walks past it. The farmer who takes the long road around, avoiding even a glance toward the field, though he cannot say why. The place calls to them, quiet, persistent, like a whisper at the back of your mind that refuses to fade. Have you ever felt drawn to a place that gave you chills, but you couldn't stay away? If you have, type "I felt it too." Because places like that exist, and towns like this carry more shadows than anyone wants to admit. The man in the field wasn't the only one making dark choices. Others have taken steps toward that same edge, maybe not as far, but close enough to feel the cold breath of it. The shopkeeper who lies just to make a sale. The neighbor who spreads gossip to taste a moment of power. The parent who ignores their child's pain because facing the truth would be harder. These seem like small choices, but darkness rarely arrives all at once. It creeps in quietly, through whispers, through decisions we convince ourselves don't matter. But they do. Every single one of them matters. Even the officers who found the body could feel it. They left the field that night, but something about it followed them home. The officers returned to the station that night, finished their reports, and tried to move on, but the field didn't leave them. The veteran officer lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, replaying the image of those stones, and the strange warmth rising from the ground. The younger officer, the one who had laughed it off at first, found himself driving past the field days later. He slowed the car and stared into the darkness. They never spoke about it. But something about that night had changed them. And it didn't stop with them. The entire town began to change. Whispers spread through the streets. Stories grew darker with every retelling. People who had never locked their doors before suddenly started doing it every night. Parents warned their children to stay away from the field. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Some of the kids still snuck out after dark. They dared each other to step inside the circle, to touch the stones, to see if they could feel what the officers had felt. And they did feel something. Not warmth, a chill. A heavy presence that sent them running home to hide beneath their blankets. Soon, the church began filling up on Sundays. The pews were packed with people searching for comfort, for answers. The pastor spoke about faith and light, trying to calm the fear growing in the valley. But even he sometimes glanced nervously toward the distant field when he thought no one was watching. The diner became the center of endless conversations. Every day, someone had a new story. An old man claimed he had seen strange lights moving across the field years ago, lights that seemed alive. A woman confessed she once heard her own name whispered from the tall grass, a secret she had carried for decades. A small child drew a picture of the stone circle, even though he had never seen it. His mother burned the drawing that same night. The field had become more than a legend. It had become a mirror reflecting the fears and secrets hidden inside the town itself. And eventually, the truth could no longer be hidden. The man's name was finally spoken, first in quiet whispers at the grocery store, then printed in bold headlines across the newspapers. When people heard the truth, many gasped in disbelief. They said they never would have guessed it was him. But if you looked closely, not everyone was surprised. Some had noticed the shadow behind his eyes long before he died. Some had felt that strange unease whenever he walked into a room, a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather. Back then, they didn't understand it. They didn't have words for it. But now it all made sense. He had chosen to walk with the darkness, and in the end, the darkness claimed him. His story didn't stay in that little town. It spread far beyond the valley. News trucks arrived. Reporters with cameras and microphones flooded the streets, searching for a sensational story. They created theories about secret cults, serial killers, government experiments gone wrong. They tried to force a spiritual mystery into a physical explanation. But they missed the truth completely. Because what happened in that field was never just a crime. The field was not a crime scene. It was a reckoning. A moment when the unseen world stepped into the light. But listen carefully, my child. This story is not really about the man. It's not even about the field. It's about you. About the choices you make every single day. The paths you decide to walk. The man in that circle made one fatal mistake. He believed he could play with fire and never be burned. He believed he could use darkness for his own gain and walk away untouched. He thought he could take from the spiritual world without paying the cost. He thought he could gain the world without losing his soul. He was wrong, completely wrong, and his story now stands like a warning carved into stone. A reminder that darkness is real. It watches, it waits, but it also reminds us of something far more powerful, that the light is real too. And unlike the darkness, the light is stronger and eternal. Your life, your path, and your destiny are not written by shadows or by chance. They are written by something far greater, something that existed long before the foundations of the world were laid. I have a plan for you, a purpose so powerful that no mistake you make, no failure you endure, and no darkness you face can erase it. Before you were born, before the stars filled the night sky, I knew you. I called you by name. Your story was written not with fading ink or crumbling stone, but with love and intention. And when I open a door for you, a new chance, a new beginning, no power on earth or in hell can shut it. Not fear, not doubt, not the whispers of the night that try to frighten you. And when I close a door, when a relationship ends or a path suddenly disappears, it is not to harm you. It is to protect you. Have you ever had a door close in your life that hurt deeply at first, but later you realized it saved you? If you have, type "it was protection," because many of the doors I close are cliffs you cannot see. I am guiding you away from danger and toward what was truly meant for you. You may not understand it right now. The world may feel heavy. The answers may feel far away. But faith has never been about seeing every step before you climb. Faith is trusting the one who already knows the way. Trusting that I am leading you even through darkness, even when the silence feels overwhelming, even when nothing makes sense to your human mind. Understand this. I am working in your life right now, in this very moment, even when you cannot feel it. Every breath you take, every choice you make, is part of something greater, something beautiful, something that will shine brighter than any shadow the enemy tries to cast. So as you hear the story of that man and the mystery of the field, remember this: your choices matter. The direction of your heart matters even more. Do not entertain the darkness. Do not call out to what you cannot control. Choose the light. Choose truth. Choose the path that leads to life and peace. And trust me. Always trust me. Because I am with you even in your darkest nights. Be patient with your journey, my child. My timing is perfect. I am never early. I am never late. I arrive exactly when the moment is right. What feels like delay to you is often preparation. What feels like loss is often redirection, leading you towards something greater. Even when the world feels silent, I am moving mountains for you. So hold on to my hand. Your story is far from over. In truth, it is only beginning. The greatest chapters of your life have not been written yet, and they will be more beautiful than you could ever imagine. The field, the stones, and that strange warmth carry a warning, but they also carry a promise. Yes, darkness may appear for a moment, but the light always wins. Always. And if you want to stay connected to that light and receive strength for your journey, subscribe now. Join this community of believers and let us walk in the light together. Subscribe today and step fully into the victory that was already written for you.